So, welcome all. We are continuing with the beautiful work Ulladu Narpadu, also called Saddarshanam in Sanskrit. This is the work composed by Ramana Maharshi in response to especially Muruganar asking him to reveal the nature of truth and the means to realize it. So we have seen half the work. It has 40 verses. There are first two introductory verses and then 40 verses. So there is totally 42 verses. The first two introductory verses, in fact, very comprehensively cover the nature of truth and the means to realize it. Both of them are given already in the first two verses. So essentially, the pointer given in the very beginning is that our very sense of existence comes forth from the ground of truth. So whenever we take ourselves to be anything, it is only because we exist that we take ourselves to be anything. So it is so obvious that we miss it. We always feel I exist. And then on top of that, we add to that I exist as XYZ. So it can be I am a mother, I am a father, I am an employee, I am retired, I am a national of this country or that country, this religion or that religion. All of that is layered on top of the sense I am. So the sentence I am is actually a complete sentence. It means I exist. You are. Similarly, everyone exists. There is a sense of existence in the heart, and on top of that comes thoughts, perceptions, words, actions, all of it. So what is pointed to in the very first verses, the sense of existence comes forth because of the absolute ground of being. Ulladalad ulla unarvu ulladu. That means the sense of existence, which is ulla unarvu, is there because there is the underlying substrate ground of reality. The sense of existence cannot come forth from void. And therefore, there is a ground of absolute existence which brings forth our sense of existence, and then that becomes identified as an embodied entity, as a human or as an animal, or all the living entities have the sense of existence. And therefore, what is pointed to is what we call as God is not something that is ever separate from our existence, but the very root of our existence. It is like if a tree is there, the tree has many fruits and leaves and all of that, and then there is the root, and then the root is in the ground. So if we can say that root is our sense of existence, and that is why the tree is there. There is all the flowers and branches and fruits and all of it. All of it exists because there is a root. And the root is there because there is a ground underneath. So that's an easy way to look at it. The ground underneath is the absolute being. And the root is the very sense of existence in our heart that springs forth from that ground of being. And therefore, the pointer is because we are identified with the branches and the leaves of the tree, we miss the root, which is to say, we identify with various partial identities, right? I am identified as all the things we just said, relationships and career and all the rest, nationality, religion, race, all of that. And because of that, we get partially focused, and it is like watering a particular branch, which of course never satisfies either the branch or the tree. Similarly, we are focusing only on a particular identity and get caught in it. We are looking for happiness out of it. We are worried because of it, there is desire, fear, all of it. Whereas the very root of our being, which is the pure sense of existence, has no change in it. It's like all the branches and the flowers, they all change in a tree, but the root remains the same, relatively speaking. Similarly, our sense of existence remains the same. And we can even perceive it intuitively. We can see that when we were a little child, when we were in the middle, like let's say young, when we are older, when we are really old, similarly, morning, evening, and night, similarly, through stressful and happy situations, through all of that, we always have a sense of existence. And the sense of existence is never old or young, never stressful or happy. It is simply the very presence in our heart that says, I exist. And we lose touch of that, and because of that, we get caught into these partial identities. So that is why it was pointed out in the very first verse that if you look for God, look within. If you recognize that your own existence comes forth from God, then you truly surrender to God by recognizing that your very existence comes forth from the one source of all. That was pointed out in the second verse too, that because of fear of death, Marana Bhayam, people may turn to God, but when they turn to God, they may turn to God out of a projection of the mind. But if they truly recognize God as the very source of their existence and therefore free of birth and death, then they abide as the true essence which is deathless. So to lose oneself to that source is the true meaning of surrender or devotion. And then we saw a lot of verses which spoke about how different things come up because of the ego, but how all of them can be rooted or resolved back to the source. So whether it is the so we always look at the world and we think therefore there must be a creator. But then if we really look at it, the very projection of the world, the creation and the creator are all coming forth only because I exist. The very sense of existence is prior to all of that. And the same was true with so many other things that was pointed out, for such as philosophies, such as dualities like knowledge and ignorance, such as time, such as space. Everything comes forth only when one has a sense of existence. So it's a very obvious but easy fact to miss. So when we are, for example, in deep sleep, none of this exists. If you are in deep sleep without any dream, there is no creation, there is no creator, there is no time, there is no space, there is no knowledge, there is no ignorance. There is only a sense of peace. And that very sense of peace is the ground which we refer to, the ground of being, which is of the nature of pure peace. But when we wake up, there is a sense of existence that rises out of that, and that sense of existence then instantly gets identified with the body and the mind and time and space and all of this, and then it's looking for happiness and all of that. So the whole pointer was, therefore, through all the verses so far, is to recognize that every duality comes only after identification. Whether it's religious philosophies, even philosophies like non-duality or duality, um, the trinity that is posited by different religions, knowledge and ignorance, all of this come forth only because of the root ignorance, which is that I am the body and I'm identified with the body. And through the individuated identification, I'm looking for answers. So the whole pointer of this entire work is that is the core ignorance we have, to take ourselves to be individual embodied entity, and thereby we look for answers. So look within and recognize that embodied entity is not our true identification. Our true nature is prior to being embodied. So in this vein, there is one verse we went over verse 16, which I wanted to quickly cover because that's a verse we didn't fully address last time. So I'll read the verse. நாமன்றி நாளேது நாடேது நாடுங்கால் நாம் உடம்பேல் நாள் நாட்டுள் நாம் படுவம் நாம் உடம்போ நாம் இன்று அன்று என்றும் ஒன்று நாடு இங்கு அங்கு எங்கும் ஒன்றால் நாம் உண்டு நாள் நாடு இல் நாம். So again, the verse is very, the language is quite complex, but the meaning is very intuitive. So it says, without us, there is neither time nor space. If we are only bodies, we are caught up in time and space. But are we the body? Now, then, and always. Similarly, here, now, and everywhere, we are the same. We exist beyond time and space. So this is again pointing to the same truth we just looked into, right? That time and space come forth only because of the perception of existence that is identified with a particular body. So we can clearly see how, for instance, even in dream, we have a completely different sense of space, sense of time. And then sometimes we wake up and we may have lived 50 years in a dream, right? And then we wake up and then we say, what happened? So the sense of time is completely warped. And all of that is because it's all relative to our experience as the embodied entity. So right now, we are living as an embodied entity. And in this, from this perspective, we are looking at time and space. And this seems to be very real. But then when we go back to a dream experience we had, and there is time and space, that feels very real. So I just suddenly remembered a beautiful story. Some of you may have heard of it, of King Janaka. So Janaka was the great king, as we know. He's the father of Sita. And he's called Videha. So that's why Sita is called Vaidehi, right? So Videha means one who is not attached to the body. And how he became unattached to the body, which is to say he became wise. So as we have just been talking, the entire theme is to become Videha, meaning Deha is body, Dehi is the embodied, Videha is the one who is not identified with the body. The pure existence that's prior to body identification is Videha. And that's why his daughter is called Vaidehi. So all these names are very beautiful if you look at it, where they come from. So how he becomes Videha, there is a beautiful story. So Janaka once apparently had a dream. And Janaka is, of course, a very powerful king. He lived in Mithila, and that's why she's called Maithili, by the way. And so in Mithila, he was ruling this kingdom. And one day he had a dream. And in this dream, it's a very vivid dream. And there is an enemy who has conquered the territory, the kingdom. And the enemy suddenly became so powerful and his army was overpowered. And because of that, Janaka's army was completely defeated. And after Janaka's army was defeated, the entire army was slaughtered. And Janaka was driven out of the kingdom. And he had to leave the kingdom incognito to escape. And once he leaves the kingdom, he is in some other kingdom where nobody recognizes him. And he is also afraid. He doesn't have any money. He has lost all his wealth, all his relations. And then he is really hungry. And then he is looking for food. There is no food available. Then there is a piece of bread that's there on the side of the road or something. He's so desperate, he goes to pick it. And as he's about to pick it, a dog comes and snatches it away. And King Janaka so this is all happening in the dream. He's crying in the dream. And then he wakes up. And then he sees that he is surrounded by this palace, this opulence. People are there to serve him. There is fruits and nuts and all kinds of great luxury surrounding him. So he's completely bewildered. So he has this big doubt now, which is a very interesting doubt, which is how the seed of inquiry can come. So he says to himself, all of this seems so real now. But all of that seemed so real then. What if that is real and this is dream? Right? How can I'm thinking that is dream and this is real, but it could be the other way around. That could be the reality and this could be the dream. So he had this big doubt. So he called all his advisors and the wise men of the kingdom, and he asked this question: was that real or is this real? And nobody could answer him satisfactorily. So he was very disturbed because everybody he went around and asked, apparently nobody could answer him. They all said something, this and that, this and that. And then finally, there's a great sage who's called Ashtavakra who comes there. He's called Ashtavakra because he's got 8 deformities in his body, but he's a very enlightened sage. And so he comes to Janaka, and everybody, as it happens, looking at this young boy who's deformed in 8 places, they make fun of him. But then Janaka asks the same question, and Ashtavakra looks at him into his eye and says, so Janaka asks the same question: was that real or is this real? Ashtavakra apparently says, that is also false, this is also false, you are real. So that's how he begins the teaching, by saying that your essence as consciousness is real. And that which is a projection of the mind was only temporary and false. This which is a projection of the mind which is temporary is also false. So the fundamental pointer that beautifully Ashtavakra brings out is anything that comes and goes is unreal. But the one who is the ground of awareness in which perceptions happen is the only reality. So we are so caught in this identification with the body and mind, and therefore we take this to be real because we think there is uh, everything is solid and there is time and there is this. But then, as Janaka's vivid dream shows, and many have had different such dreams, everything seems very real. You spend years and people go through death and marriages and jobs and losses. Everything can happen in a dream like a whole lifetime. That's what Janaka went through. So that's why the beautiful pointer in that story, which Ashtavakra brings to, is appearances are always unreal, but the ground in which appearance happens is reality. So it's like how a canvas on which painting is made, the painting can be changed, but the canvas remains the same, right? Or a screen and a movie. Any of these are a gold and ornament. All these are different metaphors. Different ornaments can be made in gold, and they're all relatively real, but they are only appearances ultimately. In reality, what is there is only gold, and the gold keeps changing into different forms apparently, but underneath it, there's only gold. So, similarly, the pure awareness that is here, and we don't have to believe in it, we don't have to take it as some theory or concept, just recognize the presence that is here when we don't think. See, everything that comes only because we think about something. For me to cognize anything requires thought, and that's necessary for functioning in this world. And same is true even in dreams. But when we do not think, what are we? That is the whole point of meditation too. When we sit simply silently and we do not engage with any thought, and we negate everything by the simple recognition that everything is an appearance in our consciousness. Whatever comes and goes is simply an appearance. Any identity I thought, any identity of a thinker or a doer I take on is only based on some knowledge that I have gathered about the sense of me and the other. So when I remain simply still, I was asking someone recently the same thing, which is, if you really tell me what is the one thing that doesn't change in you, what would that be? Just look into it and just, it's a very simple question, right? The body changes all the time. We know this. The body is suddenly not what it was 10 years back, but in reality, it's not what it was even 10 seconds back. It's changing all the time. Thoughts change all the time, feelings change, breathing changes, um, our faculty of intellect changes, our ability to rationalize changes. Everything changes. What is the one thing that does not change right now? Sorry? This, the, that you are, right? Yeah. You are there. That existence is not changing. Everything else changes. So nobody can deny that I don't exist, right? So there is, you don't have to even say it verbally. If you don't say a word, if you don't engage with any thought, you just feel a certain presence in the heart, right? You are there, you are. There is nothing to philosophize about it, discuss about it. You are. Then comes anything else after that. You are a woman, you are a man, you are this, you are that. But you are is the fundamental reality. That is what Janaka was pointed to. You are. That is the reality. That you are a king, that you are now a beggar, are both projections. So if you recognize that, then that you are remains your ground. And if you remain there, then everything else can be handled. It doesn't mean that you stop being a woman or a man or a mother or a employee or all the rest. All of those come and go. But your base note is that you are. It's like how music, Ramana Maharshi used to give this example, how in music there are different notes going up high and low, but there is a bass note always. The bass note doesn't change. That bass note is you are, the ground. The coming and going, what we do is we identify with the up and down, the high and low, and we are always therefore going for this drama. But the bass note is free of any drama. So that you are is not something you need to believe, it's not something you need to study. It's just something we need to be pointed to because we have forgotten. It's just like how people, everybody, like you're wearing glasses and sometimes you're looking for your glass. It's right, it happens, right? Many times. And the funny thing is, you're looking for the glass through the glass you're wearing. That's it's a almost a perfect metaphor because you are looking for yourself through your own being. So that's what it is all about. So earlier in the olden days, because they didn't have glasses, they gave this example of necklace in the neck. They would call it kantha abharanam. Kantha means neck and abharanam means necklace or ornament. But this is a better example because here you're using the very vision through the glass to look for the same glass. So that's exactly what we do, is that we are looking for ourselves through our own being. That we are is so obvious. And we are looking for, people even say, I want to find out who I am. And they think I am an artist. That's what I am. I have found it out, and then they get caught up in it, or they say, I am whatever, right? I mean, they are all fine, but they are only propensities. And of course, every body, mind has certain propensities, but even those propensities come and go, right? One may be a great artist, but one cannot be an artist all the time. But one is all the time, right? So that which is unchanging is what you are. Even if you are the greatest musician, dancer, programmer, whatever it is, that's still a skill that the body mind possesses. It's not your identity. So many times in the modern lingo, people use the word self-discovery for that, for identifying my core talent or core interest. And it's fine because it's actually more or less swadharma, which is okay. To identify one's swadharma, to know what I am drawn towards as a body mind is fine. But swadharma is not yourself, it's not atma. There is a difference between swadharma and atma. Atma is our self. So people use the word self for that. Swadharma is just your propensity, which you are good at, and that's good to identify. You don't want to be As they say, you don't want to make a fish fly in the sky or something, right? Every living entity has its own strength, and you have to, even with a child, you want to make sure what the strength of the child is and encourage and all that. That's all fine. But the fundamental thing we miss is that that is not yourself, because that's still changing. The self is that which is unchanging. And that the only thing that is unchanging is our sense of existence. You are. And that's why there is no philosophy needed, no theory needed, nothing needed. You just need to remain with the truth that you are. And what you are is perfect, right? You may be a good cook or a bad cook. You may be a good programmer or a bad programmer. But there is no good or bad with you are. You just are. And there is absolutely no duality there. You are very, and that sense of existence in you, in me, in her, in him is the same. That's why, words can be different. There is no difference in silence, right? Your word and my word will be different, but your silence and my silence are the same. In a similar way, everything about us is different, but the sense of existence is the same. And that sense of existence is not individual, meaning you don't choose to exist. Existence comes forth automatically through you. You cannot say, now I will. If it is up to your volition, you can say, okay, now I will cease to exist. That's not possible. Existence is automatically, spontaneously rising in the heart as I am. What is rising in the heart as I am? Where is it coming from? That source is what we call God. That which rises forth spontaneously in the heart as I am is God. So that's the direct, beautiful way. And therefore, we are not trying to conceptualize anything about who God is, but recognizing directly within our own heart that which rises as I am. So that's the essence of this verse. Now we'll go to verse 20. But as we can see, every verse brings us to the same point. It just comes in different ways beautifully. So the next two verses are about devotion. Since we talked about it, it will be good to cover that. காணும் தன்னை விட்டு தான் கடவுளைக் காணல் காணும் மனோமயமாம் காட்சி தன்னை காணும் அவன் தான் கடவுள் கண்டானாம் தன் முதலை தான் முதல் போய் தான் கடவுள் அன்று எழுதார். So the meaning of this verse is to see God, but not the self that sees, is only to see a projection of the mind. It is said that God is seen by him alone who sees the self. But one who has lost the ego and seen the self is non-different from God. So the pointer here is, just as we just saw now, first word which is important is manomayamam kachi, that is projection of the mind, right? So anything we see is only a projection of the mind. We can see a beautiful image, and because of our conditioning, we may find it to be beautiful, and someone else may not find any beauty in it, right? It's very obvious. Same with music. Somebody was telling me how someone likes Carnatic music and they don't relate to Western classical. And someone who likes Western classical doesn't like Carnatic, right? And even within Shastriya Sangeet, as they say, Carnatic and Hindustani, people like one, they don't like the other, right? So it's all based on conditioning, which is just a projection of the mind. And the same happens with also the sense of what we think is God, right? When we project some idea, people fight over it, right? That's why one religion says, this is the name of God, this is the form of God. Another religion says, no, this is the name and form. And then these people say, you are believing in the wrong God. These people say, you are believing in the wrong God, right? In reality, what they are both missing is that they are both expressing only the conditioning that they have inherited. So every true religion points out that God can never be brought within the realm of conception, within the realm of knowledge or mind, because mind is only a power that is rising within our existence. So our, as we said, you are is fundamental. Then only comes your body, your energy, your mind, your intellect. So we have these koshas we have already looked into, right? So there is the Annamaya kosha, which is the body, then the Manomaya kosha, the Pranamaya kosha, the energy, Manomaya, which is the mind, the Jnanamaya, which is the intellect and all. So the mind is a very powerful tool, obviously. We are able to read even this beautiful book or talk about it. All of that needs the mind. But all of this is only to point out that you cannot conceive that which is the very source of the mind. So the entire pointer of this work, which is the same as the Upanishads, is therefore only negation finally. Upanishad also, that's why famously says neti neti, right? Neti neti means not this, not this. So when we look upon anything through our narrow vision, we can only see something very narrow. And that narrow thing, whether it is anything it might be, can only be a pointer. We cannot know the real. It's like how um, a finger pointing to the moon, we can use a finger to point to the moon, and we can say, oh, look at my finger, and look below that branch and above this branch, and we can give all these clear directions, which is good. But then we are not actually talking of the moon. We are talking of something here through which we can look at the moon. So similarly, these names and forms that are there are a beautiful way to point to something which is beyond the realm of the pointers that we have. So it is using the mind to point to something which is beyond the mind. But what he points to here directly is the direct way to perceive God is to see your own source. So we can all, as we saw already in the earlier verses, everybody has an intuition that there has to be a creator. There has to be a some kind of even the physicists, that's why we have this concept of unified theory in physics, right? That there has to be some unified theory that explains the whole universe. So whether you call it God or whether you call it unified theory, it's the same thing. All we are saying is there has to be some thing that makes this universe possible, whether you call him God or whether you call him just energy, whatever. And but what we miss is that we miss that our own existence is coming forth from that. So what is the best way to find God? What Ramana Maharshi points to is, you can look at all the objects and surmise that there must be a God or there must be a creator, but you miss the fact that the very subject who's looking also has to exist only because of the creator. So you are easier or better off looking at the subject than the object. So it is the same conundrum in physics too, right? So when you're looking at the observed, we are always measuring the observed, but we don't take the observer into account. And that's why when we go to quantum physics, the observer makes a difference to the observed, and it makes it very difficult. The whole paradigm changes in quantum physics because in the classical physics, you only look at the observed. You look at laws of motion and all the rest. The moment you come to quantum physics, you recognize the observer actually affects the observed. It is just a simple pointer to show that your existence as subject is the foundation behind all the objects. I cannot perceive anyone or anything unless I exist. And therefore, my existence is prior to anything else. So if there is the root of all creation, he must be the root of me too, naturally, right? Otherwise, I cannot come into, it's not possible that I am separate and the world somehow is there and the world is created by God and I can just see God like that. If there be God, he'll be the source of everything, which includes the looker. So that's why Ramana Maharshi says here that the very sense of separation that is there in devotion, when it goes away, then we come in contact with God. So the word, in fact, bhakti, one of the meaning of bhakti is being together, being one. And vibhakti means to be separate. So the question he asks is, find out if there is vibhakti. because we think there is vibhakti, we think we are separate, and therefore we are looking for God. But how can we be separate when our own existence is only dependent on God? Right? So it's like the branch of a tree looking at all the other trees nearby and figuring out where it comes from instead of looking at its own root, right? Because the root from which this particular branch comes forth is the same root, is the same ground, rather, the same ground is shared by all the trees. So the best way for me to figure out where God is to look at my own root and the ground from which that has come. And then I come upon the ground of whole creation. But if I look at all the other branches out there, then I make some idea of this must be God and this must be. That's why he calls it Manomayam Mamkakshi. That is projection of the mind. So instead of projecting through the mind, if we recognize that the very seer is non-different from the seen, we are existing only because of this root source, the ground of existence. And again, it's very direct to perceive it in every verse, right? When I do not engage in even any thought. So this is why people sometimes, when we, let's say I'm a devotee, um, and if I forget God, if I have a conception of God and then I remember God and then I forget God, then I feel somehow guilty about it because I've forgotten God and then I have to remember Him. So I take the name. All of that is there, which is all good practice in its own way to purify the mind. So in fact, he says later that it creates what's called chitta shuddhi, because the mind gets purified when one is devoted, one takes a beautiful name which has that power and all the rest. But the way to be surrendered to God every moment is by recognizing that my own existence comes forth from Him. But I have to consciously recognize it. It's not that I say, I just engage in all the desires and fears, then I'm not conscious of it. So the only pointer, therefore, again and again, is to be conscious that your own existence comes forth from that same root. So to abide as your own sense of existence, to catch hold of that base note as I am, that is true devotion, right? Because then you are not identified with any partial projection of the ego, including a projection that I'm a devotee, because even that comes and goes, but your very existence doesn't come and go, as we already say. So you are, let's say, cooking, or let's say you are um, engaged in something stressful, or you know, whatever you do, you are only able to spend a certain time of the day engaging in devotional activities, whether it be chanting or whether it be um, various forms of worship like archana and all the rest, right? But your own sense of existence never leaves you. So if you, within your heart, if you always recognize that, oh Lord, you are here in my heart as the very presence in my heart. And that's why in one of the works, Arunachala Pancharatnam, he says, heart is thy name, O Arunachala. He says, Hridayam Tavanama, or something. Hridayam. So Hridayam means heart. In fact, we can see the English word heart comes from Hridayam. Many English words come from Sanskrit. So Hrid is the root which comes as heart. So the heart, which is the sense of very existence, comes forth as I am, and that existence is Bhagavan. I cannot exist without Him. I cannot breathe without that power. I cannot talk without that power. Everything else, of course, if we trace it back, nothing can be done without that power, right? One cannot speak without that, the body functioning and the breathing happening, the blood circulating. I mean, so many things are happening. What am I doing here? The eye, the imaginary eye is doing nothing. It's all happening automatically. And underneath that, the prana is flowing, the breathing, all the rest. But underneath that is the sense of existence, which is the very root. Only when one exists can all of these happen. So all of this is coming forth from God. So it is not that I exist separately and then I worship God. It is that my very existence is because of God. So that is true devotion. So that's why he says in this verse that it's called as, one of the beautiful names that's given is Atma Samarpan Yoga. So that is true yoga. Yoga means to be one, and Atma Samarpan is to be one by giving oneself completely. Even in Bhagavatam, when Prahalad speaks of 9 ways of devotion, the last one he says is Atma Samarpan. He says Shravana Kirtana Smarana Vandana Pada Sevana Pujana Archana Dasya Sakhya Atma Nivedana. Those are the 9. So all the 8 lead to that. So everything else is beautiful. Shravana, listening up to Harinam or any chant. Kirtana, again singing Harinam is so beautiful. Or singing any other name of Ambal or any name. Shravana Kirtana, Smarana, to remember him through any form. Vandana, to offer obeisances. Pujana, to do deity worship. Dasya, that is to be a servant. And then Pada Sevana, that is to serve the lotus feet of the Lord and to serve the devotees. Because Pada Sevana means to serve the servant. So Pada means the feet of the Lord, but the inner meaning of that is who is at the feet of the Lord? The devotee. So Pada Sevana means to serve the devotee. So Shankaracharya, for example, is called Bhagavat Pada. He's called Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Pada Shankaram Loka Shankaram. That is the verse to even invoke Shankaracharya. So he is called Bhagavat Pada. Why? Because he is Acharya. So when you serve the Acharya, you are serving the feet of the Lord, right? And similarly, holy rivers are flowing from there. So when you serve Ganga, you are serving the feet of the Lord because it's coming from the Lord, it is said. So that's Pada Sevana. Then Dasya, servant. Sakya, be a very friendly, loving towards the Lord, whether it be in the mood of parental love like Yashoda, or like a friend like Arjuna, or a consort like Radha. So many ways in which, but ultimately what comes is Atma Samarpana, where one loses oneself completely in him. And that is what the gopis, for example, exemplify. Right? They had no sense of existence separate from Krishna. And what that symbolizes is this, which is that your very sense of existence comes forth only from him. And when you lose it in him and recognize that he alone exists, that's devotion. And the same thing is emphasized in the next verse too. It's a complementary verse. He says, Tannaitan kanal, Talaivan tanai kanal, என்னும் பலநூல் உண்மை என்னை எனின் தன்னைத்தான் காணல் எவன் தான் ஒன்றால் காண ஓனோதேல் தலைவன் காணல் எவன் ஊனாதல் காண். He says, when the scriptures speak of seeking the self and seeing God, what do they mean? How to see the self, how to see God. As the self is one without a second, it is impossible to see it. And how to see God? To see God is to be consumed by God. It's a beautiful expression. கடவுளை காணல் கடவுளுக்கு ஊனாதல். Oon means to become food. So to become food for God is to actually perceive God, which is to say that you lose your existence in God. See, it's a way of saying when we offer prasad, we are offering different things to God. Let's say we are offering beautiful food preparations, or we may offer clothes, or we may even offer a car. We may, so many things people offer. But who is offering? I am offering. And so to offer the one who is offering is what is true devotion. That's what he's saying. So you cannot offer anything unless you exist. And how do you exist? Only because he is there as the ground of being. So the true meaning of prasad, therefore, is to make your own existence a prasad, right? Which is the inner meaning of devotion. So he says, To empty yourself is to become food for God. See, we are full of many things. We think I am this, I am that. We have all these identities. When we empty all these identities and we recognize that everything that is there is coming forth only because of this spontaneous rising of existence in me, which is again spontaneously perceiving things. The body is functioning spontaneously. Everything, sense perceptions are happening spontaneously. Thoughts are happening spontaneously. All of this is happening. And it's all coming forth from the sense of existence, which is also spontaneous. So to recognize that the whole perception of the whole universe, which starts from the sense I exist, is itself coming forth from God, from that ground of being, then you offer yourself. You don't say that you have nothing to offer but your own self then, because everything else is secondary. Primary is your existence. To put it simply, again, you cannot offer anything when you're not conscious. When someone puts you under an anesthetic, you cannot offer anything. So the reason you're even able to offer prasad is because you exist. So the whole pointer is to recognize that the one who offers is itself an offering. He is coming forth, he or she, or there is no gender there because it's just existence. The very sense of beingness that comes forth in the heart is prior to even gender. It's prior to everything. It's just the sense I am. And that sense of existence itself is coming forth from him. So he says, when you empty yourself of all these ideas that I am this, I am that, I am all of this, and you recognize that you are none of that, you free yourself of all the five koshas. See, right now, we are always identified with the five koshas. Whether we are identified with the body, physical body, we say I am fat or thin or this or that, or we are identified with the prana, we say I have good energy, low energy, high metabolism, low metabolism. We identify with the mind, we say my mind is clear, my mind is confused, all of that. We identify with the intellect, I am very smart, I am very dumb, or this or that. But when you recognize that all of these are just aspects of the various functioning of nature here, and they are not your core sense of existence, right? As we said, your body can be fat today, it can become thin if you go on a good diet in 1 year or whatever. Your mind can be similar, your prana can be very dull, it can become very strong, or it can go back and forth. Your mind can be very clouded, very clear, even in the same day. Sometimes people go through that. Intellect, again, you can think you're very smart and then you can feel very dumb the other day. None of that is you because they're all changing. The only thing that doesn't change through all of that is that you are. Your very sense of existence does not change. And when you recognize that core sense of who you are and recognize that that very sense of existence is coming forth from God, because you, as you, the very pure sense of being I am, is spontaneous voice of presence, conscious presence in our heart. And that is your true essence as you can perceive now. If you remove all these other things, and that very conscious presence is coming forth from the same ground of existence, which is what we call God. So to become food for God is another way of saying, make yourself an offering to God. Then we'll see one more verse, with which the section on discernment completes. So the last verse is 22. மதிக்குளி தந்தம் மதிக்குள் ஒளிரும் மதியினை உள்ளே மடக்கி பதியில் பதித்திடுதல் அன்றி பதியை மதியால் மதித்திடுதல் எங்கன் மதி. So a nice alliteration, all this for those who can understand Tamil, but it's very also difficult Tamil actually. But he says, Madi means intellect, Pati means husband. Pati is a Sanskrit word. It's there in many Indian languages. Mati is also a Sanskrit word which means intellect. So what here he says is, without turning inward and merging in the source, in the Lord, whose light alone shines within the mind and intellect and lends it light, how can we know the light of all lights with the borrowed light of the mind? So again, it may sound very complex, but it's a very simple pointer, which is that the light we have, here the word light is used for the capacity to know, right? Intelligence, ability to think, cognize, all of that is light. So all that is pointed to here is that which gives light to your mind is the sense of existence that you are. Again, very simply, you cannot think if you are not conscious, naturally. So your consciousness is prior to thinking, intellect. So mati means intellect. So this is the same problem as we said with the classical versus quantum physics type problem, which is classical physics is I use my intelligence to understand the world. But here the question is, who is the one who is using the intelligence? You have to know that, the observer. And the observer is the observed, because the very observer is non-different from the observed, in that the observer and the observed are both coming forth from the same source. So for me to say this object exists, that object exists, all of that, but I recognize that even the intellect is an object. It exists. It comes and goes, right? As we said, the intellect, if I simply remain, normally what I do is I am identified as the observer, as a subject. And then I look at objects outside and I'm analyzing them, understanding them. But the question is, who is the subject again? What you take as a subject is either the intellect or the mind or your energy or your body. All of that are actually objects in your consciousness, right? Because why it's an object? Because obviously you can perceive them and they change all the time. You are there and you are aware that the body is here. You are aware that the body is going through change. So clearly you are not the body. The body is another object in your consciousness. Obvious, right? Same is true with the prana, energy. Same is true with the mind. Same is true with the intellect. So when you recognize that everything is only an object, so the observer is the observed, because the observer, what you think to be the observer, is actually the observed. It's another object. And when you recognize that, then what remains is the pure observer, which is pure consciousness. Because your sense of existence cannot be observed from the outside, right? The very sense of existence that you are is self-evident. I can observe the body, I can observe the mind, I can observe the intellect, but I cannot observe my sense of existence, because I can only abide as the sense of existence. There is nobody separate. That's why we already saw in the previous verse too that there is no two self. I cannot observe myself. When we say that, we are always engaged in thought. People sometimes say that I'm looking at myself, uh, or I'm going to control myself. People use these expressions. Even in meditation, they'll say, I'm going to control myself. That's not meditation truly, because then you are actually one thought with another thought. What you call as self is your mind, and what you call as the I who's going to control is another aspect of the mind. But neither of it is truly you. So the whole core pointer of meditation is not self-control. That's why it's self-realization. Completely different. Self-realization means I realize who I am. As long as I'm controlling, there is an imagination that there are two selves. There is only one self. And when you recognize that one self is all there is nobody to perceive it, there is nobody to control it, there is nobody to observe it, there is only simply abiding as the self. That is all is self-realization. And that abidance is to devote to God, because that's why self-realization is God realization. There's not difference, because when I say I realize the self, that means I realize that I'm not the ego, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, that I am pure soul, pure Atma, and that pure Atma is Bhagavan's part and parcel. That's all it is. So when we recognize that, then we are free of this false sense of division. So that's why in this verse he says, that which gives light to the mind, madikku oli tandu, that is, that which illuminates the mind, is your sense of existence. How are you going to then know your sense of existence using the mind? You cannot. So, here all we are talking about is therefore not to use the mind to understand our existence, but to recognize that the sense of existence is always here prior to the mind. So, it's only a negation. It is just to recognize that the mind cannot be used to understand God, because you are not the mind, just as you are not the body. So, here the verse explicitly points out to the fact that the light that illuminates the mind is coming forth from your existence. And therefore, you cannot know the very light from which the room is illuminated by using a partial expression of that light, which is your mind. That's all it is, right? So when there is any sense of conscious presence, even when you think your mind is aware of objects, aware of people, places, things, that capacity to be aware is coming forth from the light, from the core sense of existence. As we said, if you are not conscious, you cannot think. So your consciousness as existence is prior to your ability to think, ability to rationalize. So they have all these definitions in Vedanta, but none of that really. So Vedanta says your ability to um, determine things is buddhi, is intellect, and your ability to uh, have a desire or have a will is mind, and your ability to execute on it is prana, and your vehicle for it is the body, right? All of this is true, but all of this can be put in one bucket, which is, it's all your expression that is coming forth, that is constantly changing, which is happening on the ground of your existence, right? It is very simple. That is, when you take the whole body, it has all these elements, right? The body, physical body is there, the prana is flowing through the body, the mind is functioning not only in the head, it's actually functioning all through the body. They say how, that's why when people feel fear, it's felt in the stomach, or some's felt in the heart. As people go weak on the knees, actually mind is all through the body. It's a wrong idea to think mind is in the head. And then intellect is perhaps more in the head, which is the capacity to rationalize and all that. But all of this, as we said, is only there because of the sense of existence. Because I'm existing as a conscious living entity, all of this happens. So the conscious presence is the light which illuminates the body, the energy, the mind, the intellect. So he is asking a simple question: how can you then use the intellect to understand the very source from which the intellect comes forth? So that's why the source is called Pati, the husband, the Lord. And the Mati is the wife. So, in fact, literally in Sanskrit, that's why Mati is a feminine word. Mati is feminine and Pati is masculine. So, it's just a symbolism. Uh, there's a beautiful story again with which we can conclude, because just to go to the, it's not directly related, but it's a very sweet story, and it brings forth the idea that the only true Lord is Bhagavan. Meera apparently, the great devotee Meera, once went to Vrindavan. I mean, the first time she goes to Vrindavan, and she goes to the ashram of a great sage, a great saint there, and she goes to the saints, and the saints' chelas, the disciples, come to her and say, what do you want? And Meera says, I want to meet your guru, because I'm here and I heard about your guru. And then the disciples say, no, our guru doesn't meet women, so please, you can go. Then Meera, in her own beautiful mood of devotions, he says, this is Vrindavan. So she says, in Vrindavan, I thought we all are women and the only husband is Krishna. And the chelas go and tell this to the guru, and the guru comes running and he falls at her feet, because The true husband, the pati, is Bhagavan, is Krishna there, which is what here is indicated. And Krishna is nothing other than our own true self. So in Gita, Krishna says, Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarva Bhuta Shayastita. Amadishcha Madhyamscha Bhutana Mantamevacha. So I am the self of all, abiding in the heart of all. And I am the beginning, middle, and end of all. So when we recognize that Krishna, which is what he is referring, which is why that story is related to this, the Pati, the true Lord, the true Master, is that sense of presence in our heart as Aham Atma. Krishna says, I am the self of all. And when we recognize that the self of all, because the self of all is the same, as we already said, you and I and he and she, everything else is different. The body, the energy, the mind, the intellect, the qualities, the capabilities. The only thing that's exactly the same is our sense of existence, the conscious presence as being. That's the same. And that is why Krishna says, I am the self of all. So that self of all, to realize the self, is therefore to realize God. And so here he says, that self cannot be realized through intellectualization. So all of this, it may sound very complex in terms of the work and all, but it's actually the opposite, which is pointing to a simple truth that don't use your intellect, don't try to rationalize your way, don't try to intellectualize by studying more and more, by reading, I have to read this Upanishad, that Upanishad, I have to study this Grantha. No, nothing is needed. You just have to recognize all of this is pointing to the simple truth that you are. Your very existence is the voice of God, is the presence of God. And therefore, don't try to, this verse, for example, negates the idea that you can use the intellect to figure it out. It is not something to be figured out. It is something to be realized and devoted to in the heart. So with this, we complete this verse, and we also complete the section of Ulladu Narpadu, which is to do with discernment. The next section is on actual direct inquiry, self-inquiry, which of course has been hinted all through, so there is nothing really new. Every verse points to both discernment and inquiry. Discernment is to negate the false, and inquiry is nothing but abiding in the truth, going to our true being and abiding in it. And as we see, they are both interrelated, and they are both pointed to in all the verses, but the next few verses will point to them more explicitly. So the question is, the verse says, Madinai ulle madaki, that is to turn the mind or the intellect within. So within what, he's asking? Inside what? See, inside and outside are always relatively used, right? So we have, because we have this sense that I am the body, the word within is used to say, go within the body. In reality, from the perspective of our own existence, there is no within or without, because everything is happening in the field of consciousness, including the body, right? The body, as we said, is an object within our consciousness. So it's not towards our inner self. It is, or we can say that, but precisely what it means is to turn towards the very source of our existence. That's all. So because we have identified with the body as me, we therefore think our existence is first rooted in this body, and then we are perceiving the world outside. What we do not recognize is that the very body is also happening within the field of consciousness. But because we are identified with the body, it is said, go within means to go within your own sense of existence and just if you look at it, in fact, one would recognize in the heart a certain throb that rises when we are very sensitive to it. So that is one way to understand the word inside. Inside is to go within our heart and recognize that the sense of existence rises from within the heart. Um, as again pointed out, in the ultimate sense, there is no inside or outside because it is just consciousness that is there. But relatively speaking, because we are rooted in the body, we feel our existence coming forth from the body, and there we can recognize that that is in fact localized in the heart. And that is why every pointer to I always points to the heart. Even in the verse we quoted of Gita, Krishna says, I am situated in the heart of all. So similarly, um, here also it is said, Ulle Madaki means to go within the heart and to find out where the sense of I comes from. So we'll actually see this more in the next few verses. But the whole point of Ulle Madaki, or to turn the intellect within, is to turn it towards its source. That is actually more like it. So the question is, the pointer is, where is it coming from? So I'm able to think. If we turn within, which is to say see, normally when we are thinking, we are looking for objects to think, right? Okay, I'm thinking about maybe some worldly topic, science or politics or economics or whatever, or then I can think about philosophy, right? I can take a philosophical topic, think about it, or I can take a very abstract topic, right? But the question here is to turn within and find out where thinking is coming from. That is another way to understand this. Inside, Ulle Madaki means to turn the intellect to its source. So instead of thinking about something, to think about the thinker. Where is the thinking rising from? Why am I able to think? And again, it's very simple. It's not like a complex philosophical topic or anything. The very simple pointer is I'm able to think because I exist. Just if we just recognize that much, we are good. I exist, therefore I think. Not I think, therefore I exist. So Descartes said the opposite. He said, I think, therefore I am. But actually, I am, therefore I think.
So existence is a continuum.
Yeah, it's always present, right? The very presence uh, pointing back to the source. Exactly. It's the continuum that is ever present in your heart as I am.
So then, why is it individualized?
It is individualized only when you are associating it with the body.
So then I should be able to sense somebody else's existence too. Like it is a thing, right? It is a
No,
continuum. Like why is
existence.
it like my? Why is it I am, not just am?
Well, it's actually am. The word I is superfluous there. It's just am. It's existence. See, when you are existing, when you recognize without any sense of identification the very presence of being, is there any individual there?
Oh, yeah.
No, right? So then that
But
is,
it is. But I'm assuming that
no, there
there
is
will be
none.
no.
There is
When I
none.
get there, yes. But for
No,
now,
right?
yes.
It's not about even getting anywhere. It's about recognizing that when you are sitting silently, when you have no thought whatsoever, just unplug yourself, let's say, and just remain still and silent. There is a sense of presence.
Yes, but
And
to
that
me that
presence,
is still localized, right? It is with this it is this existence, but
it gets clouded because of your, there is, see, the other way to, there is a metaphor given for it, which is if you have 100 parts of water, right, and there is sunlight, and the sunlight is shining in the 100 parts of water, reflecting. You see 100 suns in each of the water pot, right? And every little sun in each of the pots is nothing but the same sun that is in the sky, one sun, but it seems individuated. So it's kind of like that, right? It is that because it's felt in the heart as existence, there is the sense that it is individuated. In fact, that is in a way very good way to look at it, which is the why the question who am I or the inquiry who am I is taking you back to that non-individuated existence. See, taking the same metaphor, if you have a pot of water, normally you are identified with the water, let's say, and then the water is dirty, the water is clean, the water is this color, that color, all that is there. But when you recognize that the entire water is all lit up because of the sun that's being reflected, and that sun is what is illuminating that pot, and that is what you are referring to as a apparently individuated existence. It's not actually individuated, but it's apparently individuated. But when you say stay with that and see where this is coming from, then you go to the totally non-individuated one sun, right? So that's exactly right, that the inquiry of who am I is to recognize that sense of existence first, abide as that sense of existence and not mix with the water, not mix with the body and mind, but remain pure as that sense of existence, even if it feels individuated, but it's free, right? Because that sense of individuated existence you're talking about is still unchanging.
Mm.
It doesn't change because you had a good thought or a bad thought, because you ate a good meal or a bad meal, because you are feeling healthy or sick. It is still a non-changing, unconditioned, unmoving sense of existence, even if it feels individuated, right? So that is fine. So that if you stay with that, and then stay with the very, you don't even have to ask anything at that point. You just abide as that. It has to take you to its very source, because then that individuation also goes away. Just as the light in the sun in the pot, as long as it's mixed with the water, the sun is found to be shaking, and when the water is shaking, the sun is shaking and all the rest. But we just, if the water is all made clear and the sun remains clear, and then you trace the sun back to its source, you are going to the original source. So similarly, when you stay with the sense I am in your heart, even if it feels individuated, it's okay. It is pure existence. And when you stay with the pure existence, then that is nothing but the same source which is announcing itself in every heart. So that is why the sense I am is actually not the ground, but it is the root. So the metaphor we used also is that the root of a tree is I am, and the ground is the original. So the ground is common, the roots are different, right? There are a million trees, each tree has a different root. They all share the common ground. So the root is I am, and the ground is that which is even beyond I am, which is the absolute source. So, yeah, that's a good question actually.
So, if you're not supposed to use your mind to see yourself,
Mm.
how is that achieved? Like when you meditate, you're thinking about something, right? Now, you're not supposed to think, but what are you doing when you meditate? How do you meditate?
Yeah, so the question is, if you're not using your mind, what are you supposed to do in meditation? How do you meditate? Yeah. See, meditation is of course an overloaded word. And so it's good question, right? Because normally meditation involves a duality between the meditator and the object of meditation. And there are different objects of meditation people have. You can meditate upon the breath, you can meditate upon the mantra, you can meditate upon um, some sacred syllable of a different kind or whatever. And that's all still retaining the division between the meditator and the meditated, right? So you're using the mind, as you said.
Yes.
You're using the mind to focus on the breath. You're using the mind to focus on something, right? But here, But then what you are missing then is that the very ground of presence in which the mind is meditating upon the object of meditation is not being observed. See, you exist and therefore you are meditating, right? Let's say you are watching the breath. You are watching the breath. There is you as the observer and there is breath as the observed. Now, the observer and the observed are both happening only because you exist. So the core pointer of direct pointer of Ramana Maharshi or of all of Vedanta is your existence is the purest form of meditation. And there you have no use for the mind. Because once your mind comes in, then you have the duality. I do something with the mind. I either look at a mantra or look at any object of meditation. But when you recognize that the very presence as you are is complete, you don't need to use your mind to exist. So the whole process of meditation, therefore, in the direct way of self-inquiry and self-abidance, is to not engage with any thought. Whenever any thought rises, all you have to do is recognize that the thought is rising because I exist. Where is this thought rising? To me.
So that's the thing, right? So how do you stop thinking, like not think about anything when you meditate? How do you do that?
So the question is, how do you stop thinking while meditating? No, the that is not the goal. If you make it a goal to stop thinking, then that's another thought, right? It becomes a
Chicken or egg problem.
right, or an infinite regress or whatever. The point is, you are not trying to stop thinking. You are only recognizing the ground from which thinking itself happens. So when thought rises, it's not a problem then. You just remain alert though. The simplest pointer is, see, thought is a distraction only when you either chase the thought or when you try to control the thought, right? You either chase the, like, I'm sitting in meditation and some thought comes about what will happen to this particular whatever scenario or at my work or whatever. Then you start thinking about it and then you are like 2-3 minutes later you realize that, oh, I have lost in thought, right? So that's why thought is a distraction. Or on the other hand, your thought comes and you say, oh, I should not be thinking this thought, so let me not think, I should not think, and I should be looking at something else. Then you are again struggling with thought. That's the negative aspect, which are both the same. But what self inquiry beautifully points to is you do neither. When thought comes, you remain alert. And so the thought just comes up. Now you don't engage with it, you don't suppress it, but you recognize that the thought is there. There is the thought. Now gently ask yourself, where is this thought happening? It's obviously happening in me. I am aware of this thought. So then you simply remain aware of the thought as having risen in your consciousness, and thus you gently turn the attention away from the thought to your very sense of presence in which the thought has come. So you don't use the mind, therefore, to either control the thought or to indulge in the thought. This is exactly what the question was also. How do you turn the mind within? Ulle Madaki. It is to recognize that the thought is happening in my very sense of existence. I am, and to me the thought rises, and therefore going back to the sense of existence without engaging in the thought. But you have to be very alert for that. So that is why alertness is very essential, not control. If you are remaining very alert, then whatever thought rises, I instantly catch the thought is rising. After a point, you don't have to even verbalize, you recognize instantly that the thought is rising in me. I am aware of the thought. And this sense of existence in me is in fact choicelessly aware of the thought. It is instantly aware, it is spontaneously aware. And it is ever present. So then even if the thought goes away, the same sense of existence is there. And
So
the sense of existence is very free. Thought seems to be binding. So for me, the freedom of being just myself, the true self, is available here and now, and I don't have to do a thing for it. Everything I do with thought is taking me away from it. So therefore, using the mind is taking me away from my very ground of existence. Now, the mind is obviously to be used for activities when you are doing any worldly activities, but the problem we have is we are using the mind when it's not needed. That's what is all this chatter in the head and all that. So, the simple direct pointer of meditation is I sit in meditation and I don't have to engage the mind at all. Initially, of course, the mind is putting up all this noise. You have to remain super alert. When you're alert, you recognize that the mind is just whatever the mind does, it's only because I exist. And my existence is pure. The mind is can be good or bad, right or wrong. All those judgments are there at the mind level. The pure sense of existence has no judgment, no good or bad. It's always there. When I get in touch with that and I abide as that, then that's meditation. Then another thought comes, you have to be vigilant and again do the same thing. Yeah.
so is it then? It almost seems like sleeping is a form of meditation, right? So it's only that you have a set time to sleep.
Correct.
But if you sit like this in waking time
Yeah.
now and you just fall asleep, you're not controlling the thought. It's just coming and you're.
Right. So in
So
fact,
is that the same? Can we sleep
yeah.
while meditating?
No, the other way around. See, in fact, meditation is actually awake while there is a nice expression for it in Sanskrit. It's called Jagrut Sushupti, which means wakeful sleep. Jagrat means awake, Sushupti means sleep. So wakeful sleep is meditation, which is to say, I am conscious fully, but the mind is asleep. That's meditation. So you remain, and then you can engage in activities too with that sense of same abidance in that inner inner sense of calmness. That the mind can be obviously engaged when you are doing any activity outwardly, but inwardly there is that sense of complete
So,
peace.
so that means sleeping is a form of meditation, but when we do it in wakeful time, we are choosing to recognize that we are striving towards it and doing that. That is that. Okay.
See, it's deep sleep, that's why rejuvenates us, right? Deep sleep, if you are not having any dream of any kind, any disturbance, and you sleep well, it rejuvenates because you are in getting touch with the source in the deep sleep state, but it is not conscious, and therefore it comes and goes. It's not within your control, and you are completely subject to influences outside. See, you can have a very beautiful deep sleep, and then you wake up in the morning, you are very fresh. It's very nice feeling to have. And then let's say someone comes and insults you, you are immediately subject to them, right? Because you don't have your um, because you are identified with the mind, you become subject to other people's opinions, you subject to other people's other world events, all of that. So the peace of deep sleep, which was unconscious, to have it consciously is meditation. Then I'm not subject to, so you come and tell me you are the dumbest person I've met. It's fine, you just remain in that same ground of existence. But if you're not, then uh, it has its value, but it's not going to give you the peace.